back with another end of year list. Like we said when we did the top 10 cars, there will be more. And here we are. This is the top 10 SUVs brought to you by ties, because there are a lot of ties in this list. So let's get right to it.
I thought you meant ties as in what we wear, but okay. No, this makes a lot more sense.
I don't have a tie.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
Ready?
All right.
Tied for number 9, Mini Countryman S.
So to start, we actually don't have a top 10 list. It's a top 11 because of ties. There'll be a theme. So tying for 9th place is something I literally drove last week, and it just snuck in under the wire. It's the new Mini Countryman S. Kyle, you drove this overseas. I don't think you've driven it here yet.
This
right?
is the one trim I haven't driven, actually.
Oh.
So I drove the all-electric SE. I drove the sporty JCW, but I have not driven this one.
A JCW, I can't wait to try. But so the S is all new this year, and it is much bigger, 5 inches longer. It's, people have choked. The Mini's not so mini. Well, we get it in this, but this is now the exact size of that sort of small compact crossover, the X1. I mean, it shares a platform with it, so the things like for more regular Crosstrek, Roller Cross, HRV, that's the size of this. But it's 2 liters, got the X1's engine now, which is 241 horsepower, I think, which is a huge step up from 189. And you feel it, and it drives nicer. It doesn't drive as mini-like per se, but it drives more BMW-like, which, take what you will from that. But it's still a little more responsive with its little wheel and tight turning radius, that it's still kind of fun to throw around. And like I said, the power comes out way better. But the only thing that I think kept it this far down the list is it went to a dual clutch transmission this year from an 8-speed automatic. And there's no manual mode. There's no paddle shifters, no shift. Like it's a weird combo.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't driven this one, but like I said, I've driven the others, and I really think it's fun because people who are like, oh, it doesn't drive like a Mini. It's like, well, it's not a Mini in the classic sense, but when you compare it against the other vehicles in its class, it is pretty fun to drive, except that lack of paddle shifts. But yeah, the interior is comfortable. It's a really cool interior. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's weirdly not that expensive when you compare it to premium options, because a Mini is a premium model.
Yeah, it undercuts the GLA 250 4MATIC, and it undercuts the pure gas Alfa Romeo Tonale. We're talking like less than 1,000, but still, like you said, it drives really well because it's X1 base, which is one of our favorite cars in the segment.
Yeah,
and it has a funky interior, and then they took it up another level with this. So yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Yes.
Tied for number 9, Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness.
All right, another tie. Well, still the same tie for 9. There's one more to come, spoiler alert. So this one, the screenshot's just from a review I did, but we really found out what this Crosstrek is all about on our L11 SUV comparison, where it placed 3rd. And it was this exact model, the Wilderness, and I don't know if we had, say, the Limited, if it would have maybe placed even higher or lower, but the Crosstrek continues to be just a simple formula that works.
Yeah, I mean, Mike liking a Subaru, shock, but no, it's
one in my driveway that we own. Oh, what a shot.
It's true though. Like I didn't really get the Crosstrek until I drove this generation, and specifically the Wilderness. It really just inserts itself into your life in a way that doesn't cause any friction, and because it's a Subaru, like, yeah, it doesn't have the nicest interior in the class, but it feels like it will wear well, which is important. It has a better all-wheel drive system than most anything else in the class. It has more ground clearance, so you can chuck it places. Basically, half the exterior is black plastic on this, so you're not too worried about scratching the paint. It's super practical, and it's the right size for a lot of people, unless you need a ton of space for car seats or stuff. It's really good. It's a really good all-rounder, and it's pretty affordable.
Yeah, and if you get the Wilderness, people will know what it is because it says Crosstrek in 8-foot letters on the side. It's funny how you're describing it, because it's sort of what I've always likened it to. Is it reminds me a lot of a 90s Camry or Accord, in the sense of It wasn't the flashiest. It doesn't have this big engine or do this or do that, but it just does what you want, and it still does a lot of things better than a lot of others. Like you said, this thing has 9.1 inches of ground clearance, yet against the 11 SUVs, it was one of the better handlers still. With that much ground clearance and squishy all-terrain tires, it shouldn't be. So if we had like a limited, it probably would have been better, but it is the best product Subaru makes right now, and they sell a lot of them.
And also tied at 9th is the Grand Wagoner L Series 3.
And finishing off our three-way tie for 9th is another. I just realized I shouldn't have changed the slide while we were talking because I need a better cut. So I'll start again.
Okay, yeah.
Because I want to introduce each car. So, all right. So finishing up our three-way tie for 9th is something completely different than the Crosstrek. It is the Grand Wagoner L, which means super long, and it's the Series 3, which means super fancy. This is actually a 23 that I drove at the start of last year. I actually had it over some of the holidays, and it's a giant fridge. Like, that's what it looks like. And I know there's a lot of comments about it looking like an appliance, but that giant square shape just works so well because you have 3 livable rows. You have a lot of cargo area. There's no, I think, giant American SUV that does comfort better than this in the sense of ride comfort combined with seat comfort.
Yep, it's the vehicle I love to hate. Because like this sort of vehicle, I live in the largest city in Canada. There is no need for a vehicle this big, and yet every time I get into a Grand Wagoneer, I'm like, oh, it's so good. It's it's so comfortable, and it does. Like it pampers you so well. I'm pretty sure you could park the Crosstrek inside of it. Yeah, I understand.
It's built on the Ram, which is the most comfortable full-size pickup to drive because it doesn't have the traditional suspension setup. So that's a huge plus for this. And when I was on the Charger Daytona program not too long ago, these were our shuttles. And getting in one and being in the middle and rear, which I rarely get to do because I'm driving, I was like, this is so nice. And then a direct American competitor that I will not name was a shuttle later in the week, and I was like, yeah, it's not as nice. I mean, it's still nice, but this just, yeah. We dubbed the QX80 the Japanese Range Rover. This could be maybe the American Range Rover.
Yeah.
7th place, we have the Genesis GV80 Prestige 3.5T.
Moving on to another tie, this time for 7th, we start with the Genesis GV80. Particularly the Prestige that I drove, but I think the vehicle in general. So I took it on a 3,000 mile road trip this summer, and it is sort of in the same vein as the Grand Wagoneer we talked about. It is such a comfortable, stylish, well, Grand Wagoneer is not stylish, but it's such a comfortable, stylish SUV that really pampers inside. You know, it's not the sportiest, which is interesting because the coupe is and the GV70 isn't, but they went more luxury with this, and it suits it really well.
Were you on the surface of the sun for this? It's very bright. I swear I've driven some of these vehicles. So far, it's been a very mic-heavy portion of the list, but I was on the first drive for this just before you had this because they were pretty close together. And yeah, it's funny because it got updated for 25, but it's a very subtle update. Like if you told people it was updated and stuck them together, I don't think people could really tell. But that's because the inherent rightness that Genesis' first SUV had out of the box is everything you said. It's not the sportiest, and that's fine. I think a 2 or 3 row SUV doesn't need to be that sporty, especially if it's not a, well, I guess they don't have Magma yet, but like that's for the coupe to do. This leans into just being comfortable, and you can knock off hundreds of miles, and it looks incredible. I still think the styling makes it look way more expensive than it is.
Yeah, they like I said, they nailed the styling, and they've just enhanced it, exaggerated a bit. And like inside, there's more changes, but you need to be inside to notice. Like the football wheels gone, and some of the dash and stuff's updated. But yeah, it continues to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Tied for 7th, the Mazda CX50 Meridian Turbo.
So tying it is we're jumping back to a smaller vehicle. It is the Mazda CX50, specifically the Meridian. And I call it the Meridian because we've said for a year, 2 years now, that it is the best trim. So It has the 2.5 turbo, which like it's a good engine. As we've said, it never feels as powerful as the numbers suggest, but it has the right level of sort of power and torque for this. And the Meridian's their off-road version, so you get the all-terrain tires, different suspension tuning, and it just really ties the vehicle together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because Mazda has been trying to replace the old SUV lineup with the new ones, right? The double digits, and this is ostensibly the replacement for the CX-5, but both of them kind of approach the segment in a different way, and the CX-5 is still so popular that it's the one single digit that has lived on. But this makes a lot of sense because, like you said, it's the off-roady one, and it's not because you actually plan on really taking it off-road. It's just that it's more comfortable and squishy and like a little more balanced, because the regular one, especially on the top trim with the big wheels, just becomes harsh. I'd love to find out. I haven't driven the hybrid yet. I'd be very curious to try that, and I'm not sure off the top of my head if it is compatible with Meridian. I get the feeling it isn't.
I don't think it is, yeah.
Yeah, just because, I mean, Toyota doesn't even do its off-roady version with the hybrid powertrain, not properly. So yeah, I think in a dream world, the Meridian with the hybrid would be the ultimate all-rounder Mazda.
Yeah, like you're saying, it's not the most hardcore off-road in the segment. I mean, that kind of goes to the Forester with its wilderness, but it's also not just a appearance package. Like, it does have different bits, and they actually revised all the CX50's suspension this year because I think of the complaints, and they drive a little more like the Meridian, but it's definitely the one to get in that family.
Mm-hmm.
Four-way tie for third, starting with the Genesis electrified GV70 and Cadillac Lyriq.
All right, moving on. We have a four-way tie for third.
Jeez.
And we'll start with two vehicles that are part of this tie in the same article. Would you imagine that? So they are the Cadillac Lyriq and the Genesis electrified GV70.
This was one of my favorite comparisons we did this year, because these are two excellent vehicles. I mean, the electrified GV70 won Canadian Electric Utility Vehicle of the Year from AJEC. We're both members. And then the Lyriq kind of beat it.
Yeah, it's easily, I think, the best vehicle on the, I don't know, they don't want to use the word anymore for that GM shared platform, so I don't know what we call it now, but
I mean, if it was born as an Altium, I'm still calling it an Altium.
Yeah.
All future vehicles on that platform will call unnamed electrified GM platform, but no, it's an Altium.
I think the Prologue's the close second, and then probably the ZTX, because Honda's and Acura have done good jobs, but this one, it looks cool. It looks so distinct too. Like when I see them, especially at night, you're like, what is that? Oh, it's the Lyriq. And
yeah,
it drives nice. The interior is nicely appointed. Super Cruise. And it's crazy quick. Like, they don't kind of really advertise or push that fact, but it's like 500 horsepower still. Like, it's
500 horsepower.
Yeah,
the rear drive one is like 340, which is a lot for something this size. It feels special. And it's concerning because whenever Cadillac gets to do something special, I feel like it gets killed off in 2 years. So I hope this sticks around, but it's a really good move. Cadillac has pushed itself into the future in a way that makes sense to the brand. There was something I really wanted to say about it that I really appreciate. I mean, it doesn't charge quite as quick as the Genesis, but it has more range. Something that I find really impressive that GM has figured out and seemingly no one else has. Its dual motor setup loses something like 5 miles of range versus the rear drive one. So you get 160 more horsepower, you get all-wheel drive, and you lose almost no range. Like, I find that really impressive. So yeah, like you said, this is the best car on this platform. I would argue that maybe the Equinox is actually second, but the Prologue is right up there too. Like, they're all very good. And that's not to take anything away from the Genesis. The Genesis is great. It feels like the sportier one. It's a little smaller inside, but it has a nicer interior, but it lacks some tech that the Cadillac has, chief amongst it being Super Cruise.
Yeah, I know, like, the Celestiq's going to be obviously the flagship halo car for the brand, and you still have the Escalade, but they should really push this in like a Lyriq V with the twin motor out of the Silverado or something with that kind of power would be great.
I feel like that was quietly confirmed this year that a Lyric V is coming.
Oh, it is, and I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, if it has
Yeah, like-
that twin motor that
Bring it on.
it runs at 600 and something normally, but it boosts to 700 and something. Yeah, sign me
Oh,
up.
it'll be so good.
Still tied at 3, Toyota Corolla Cross XSE all-wheel drive hybrid.
All right, so tying it is we didn't mean to do this, but we're really good with the list going all over the map because now we're down to a not tiny, but a small SUV that we didn't really like the first time we drove it, and then it got hybrided, and all of a sudden that kind of fixed everything. I guess we didn't realize how much the underpowered droney engine was kind of taking away from the whole experience, and once you got way better fuel economy, more power, and a smoother ride, it's like,
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little less positive, but what I was going to say is amazing fuel economy kind of masks the other shortcomings of the Toyota Corolla Cross and the Kia Seltos.
well, it's just the Corolla Cross.
Yeah. But of the Corolla Cross hybrid in particular, I mean, it's a Toyota hybrid. Of course, it was going to be good.
In our 11 SUV comparison, it came second, and it almost 50% more fuel economy than any other competitor there. Like, it was crazy because it's the only hybrid, and in that segment of cash conscious people, that's a big deal. And I mean, inside it's okay,
It's
but
fine.
the exterior looks pretty nice. Like, it looks like a little RAV4, like it has family resemblance. So
Yep. Yeah, I think it's like for that mega comparison that we did, this was my pick. If I was gonna have to take one of them home, this is the one that I would live with because it's, like you said, it rides better than the regular one. It's quicker, but it's also better on gas. The rear seat isn't great, but I don't really need that. So yeah, it looks good. I think it's a great vehicle, and I am now pushing a lot of people who are asking new car advice towards that, unless they need the additional space, right? Like, then you have to go to the RAV4, but then you're going to wait if you're waiting for a hybrid. And then of course there's also the Kia, which won our mega comparison.
Kyle, the cart pusher.
Yeah.
Our final third place finisher, Kia Seltos SX all-wheel drive.
So rounding out our three-way tie is the Kia Seltos. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Its score actually tied. So you're thinking, well, how did it win overall? Well, we considered other categories too that aren't in our normal sort of all vehicle scoring. And when you add in some of those, like the Seltos is down on fuel economy compared to the Corolla Cross, but it pretty much beats it in every other area. Like, its price per features is such a steal. It's big for the class inside, but it's not big on the outside. That little turbo engine drives well. I mean, the biggest issue is probably the transmission, but outside of that, it's really good.
Yeah, the transmission is a problem. It's tardy to respond. There's another issue for me personally, but I realize that this is more of a person-to-person one, is that the seating position is just something that I can't ever fix in the Seltos. It always feels very upright, like you're on a stool looking down at the wheel.
That is true.
That is a bit of a problem, but I mean, if you're a different size or proportions than I am, then maybe it'll be fine. It's a very good vehicle in the class, obviously, because
and it doesn't excel at any one thing. Like, it's not a class leader in any one thing, but it's like always like second or third. So just overall, it ends up being such a good all around.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that takes us now to the tie for first, because there's ties and everything.
All ties.
So let's move on.
Then tied for first, the Range Rover SV.
All right, we'll start with the more ridiculous first place choice. So this is, I know in the car we talked about some high-end exotic cars that, how could this be on the list? Well, this is a near $300,000 SUV, but it made it because it is amazing at everything. I mean, for that price, it should be. I mean, some vehicles, their price tags, you're like, this costs that much? But driving this, I mean, it's got the presence, especially in this matte paint. It's dialing inside and out. It's amazing. It has so much power. It drives so smooth. You can also make it sporty by adjusting settings. And then inside, it's like it has that full recline second row seat with the footrest and everything. You got individual screens for people to use, and it's Range Rover's move up market, which may sound weird because they are up market, but it was the Aston Martins, the Rolls Royces, the Bentleys kind of went a level higher than what Range Rover was. So they said, all right, we'll make the SV and come meet you up there. And I totally think they have.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me because in my mind, I mean, again, living in Toronto, I see so many Range Rovers that this one actually does not stand out. I'm like, oh, it's a matte paint. But this one is actually like that from the factory. But your point, it makes sense. Like the Range Rover was the original luxury SUV. It set the bar for everyone. But then all the other brands leapfrogged because they are brands that sell at that price regularly. And yeah, it makes sense that if anyone is going to move to that category, Range Rover can do it.
I recently stayed on a trip in a really way out of my price range hotel, and at night it was like the place to be in town, and the amount of high-end cars, and there were a lot of Cullinans that would roll in, but there was still a lot of Range Rovers and G-Wagons. Like those are the three, but it's almost too like they need this even if they only sell a handful to athletes, celebrities, whoever. But it's the image that, when, as you said, it's hard to tell it apart from regular Range Rover. So then the image of it gets elevated because anyone that just buys a regular Range Rover looks kind of like that.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
And our final vehicle, tied at number 1, the Hyundai Santa Fe Calligraphy.
So, although the scores had this tied with the Range Rover, I think you and I can agree this is easily the best SUV we drove this year if you take everything into account, from everything, like price included in value. Like, it is such a good SUV, and that's the new Santa Fe.
Yeah. The new Santa Fe just resets the bar. It's impressive,
and it looks like a bar.
It does. There are no curves outside of the wheels. It's impressive to me because I think I said this on my first drive. It doesn't technically do anything new. It's a platform that we've seen elsewhere in the Hyundai Kia alliance. It's powertrains we've seen before. There are features inside that we've seen before, like the sterilization feature in the top trim that used to be a Genesis thing. But that's kind of why this does so well, is it pulls features from premium models into a mainstream model. It is much boxier than the old one, but it's so much more spacious because of it, because the old Santa Fe actually ended up being slightly less spacious than the Tucson once the Tucson was renewed. And so Hyundai needed to do something different. And since the market is so SUV crazy, why not do something a little boxier? The Palisade can be the swanky flagship. This is more practical. And it translates. It's super useful. There's those handles on the side to get up and access the roof rack. The third row is totally fine for adults. It's not great, but it's better than anything else that's this sort of mid-size. Like, it's not the bigger ones like the Palisade. My only complaint, and this only applies to the Canadian market, is that you can't get the hybrid in the top trim unless you get the NHL edition, which is very limited.
Yeah, this article we have here specifically is you driving the hybrid, and I drove the top trim on a mini family road trip, and everything you say is right. Like, although it's a size smaller, it succeeds where a lot of these smaller 3-rows have failed, like the old Rogue, and now the soon-to-be discontinued Tiguan. It's a little bigger than them, but the third row isn't just good for its size. It beats some of the bigger guys. Like, that third row is easily better than the Highlander, the CX90. Yeah, like a lot of those vehicles, maybe the Ascent, it's clever packaging, and a lot of it's because they took sort of a page out of Subaru's book and went with the box, but they didn't make it like look bad or ugly. It kind of has, as we just talked about Range Rover, it has a bit of a Land Rover look to it. Like, it could put a Discovery badge on this and people might not notice it isn't.
Yeah, and then people might actually buy Discoveries.
And then inside, it's higher end than it should be, and when you get to the pricing, it's on top of some of those larger ones, or even a little bit underneath, but it has more features. And like I said, third row is a little more usable. It's better on gas. It's more maneuverable. Like it's I don't know, but it feels like when the Crosstrek came out, that this is a segment people haven't been, not a segment that people haven't been doing, but everything grew past this size that people want something this size again. Because all the 3-rows were kind of the size initially, and then they kept getting bigger and bigger. And now, like I said, the Palisade's massive, the Atlas is massive. There's sort of a vacuum down here, and I think this is the one that I would right now buy as my family vehicle for where we are in life and what we need. It's just, it does everything.
It makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I will also say though, styling is purely subjective. I get that. I like how it looks from the front. I still have not gotten used to the back. The back is odd. It's really strange, but I mean, the flip side is the practicality, right? Like, it opens as one huge lift gate, and that's kind of incredible.
Yeah, the taillights are disproportionately too low for the vehicle, but I don't know if this is true, but I've heard there's something either with just the styling trends or the laws in Korea that you need lights at a certain height only, and that's why Hyundai and Kia for so long put them in the bumper, which, like the turn signals, which made no sense, because any sort of little fender bender, you're replacing a whole signal. So that might explain some of it, but I could live with that for, like you said, the usefulness on the side. Mm-hmm. And you can have friends and family try to count how many H's are on the vehicle.
It's true. It's a fun pastime.
I don't know if they'd ever get to.
This is I would be shocked if this doesn't win some SUV of the year awards.
And if it doesn't, they're just wrong.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. You heard it here first.
All right, well, thanks a lot for tuning in. We will have some more lists, these ones included, on AutoGuide.com, and hope to have some more lists in the new year on YouTube. So we'll see you later.
So long.